Welcome everyone to our graduate case study reviews. If you are brand new here, we do these every other week where we are celebrating the graduates of our Retrain the Dyslexic Brain program. So today we are going to be celebrating Titus, an 11-year-old boy who went from being 64% accurate to 93% accurate within just 12 and a half weeks. And so we'll go through all of this data step by step, but he made absolutely incredible progress in just 12 and a half weeks time doing our program for 10 to 15 minutes each day. So everything that I'm about to share is with that in mind. But his brain's ability to actually hear those sounds accurately was about half when he started, went to the 93% accurate. His scores on the Wide Range Achievement Test 5 reading went from the 39th percentile to the 99th percentile, and his scores on the Wide Range Achievement Test spelling went from the 4th to the 82nd. And so when we talk about statistical significance, and we'll go through all of this in just a minute, he made absolutely incredible statistically significant progress in all three of the tested areas within just 12 and a half weeks. And so I think the coolest part about doing a case study is that we're not just talking about the data, we're actually talking about the human that this happened to. So his mom said he is completely transformed and changed in how he can read better, and now he can actually spell. This program, for anybody on the fence, just do it. It works, it works, it works. You put in the time. And in this case, again, we're talking about 12 and a half weeks and the dedication, and it's life-changing for your kid. So just again, for the caveat, Autumn only missed 3 days with her son. So she worked in this program for 10 to 15 minutes for 12 and a half weeks, and this is the result that she got. So I'm sure that what you're probably wondering, and what a lot of people wonder, is like, how on earth did you do this? And so what happens is, we'll talk about this, but there are areas of the dyslexic brain that are underdeveloped, and we know that we can actually help the brain to develop activity in those areas by doing these neuroscience-based techniques, reorganizing how the brain responds to language. And so what you have is a system that you have access to in your home, and you are making exponential gains, just like Autumn and Titus, within just a few months. It results in massive increases in confidence and independence with reading and spelling. But again, you're able to bring these things into your home. So what we're talking about, and all of the results that Titus got, is by the hand of his mother through our coaching. So they live in a rural area of the country. They did not have any kind of tutoring, any kind of access to anything at all. And so this was a huge, huge help for her to be able to take this into her home, do it herself within that 10 to 15 minutes a day. Again, they only missed 3 days out of the 12 and a half weeks, but their results were absolutely incredible. So with that, I want to just start us off by helping you to understand a little bit more about the dyslexic brain and what makes it unique, because as a parent of a child with dyslexia, this information is just really, really valuable for you to understand. So if you look at this image here, this is an fMRI of two brains. So on the left, we have a non-dyslexic person, and on the right, we have a person with dyslexia during a language task. So what's really interesting is that if we had these two people side by side, eyes at rest, just hanging out, we wouldn't notice anything incredibly different about the way that these brains function. But the minute that you ask these people to do a language task, we see something very unique in the profile of a person with dyslexia that just doesn't look the same. And so you'll notice that in the back here, in the occipital lobe where vision is controlled, there is quite literally no activity. So, we see a word, let's say it's cat, up here where our eyes are, and it takes that information in and it brings it to the back of the brain to process it. And there's not information there for it to do that. So the letters come in and the brain doesn't know what to do, which is why it'll add a letter in, or it will omit a letter, or even an entire syllable. So it's not that this person isn't intelligent. It's not that they don't try or that they're not wanting to. It's that their brain quite literally does not have activity in that portion during a language task. And the other significant difference you'll notice is here in the parietal temporal lobes, where you can see in the typical reader, there is activity here and far less activity in the person with dyslexia. So again, that's why, like you'll say a word and even sometimes a kiddo's ability to kick that back out and repeat it to you can be impaired. So there's definitely a difference in how the brain is processing language, which will show up in spelling, it will show up in reading, it can even show up in working memory and recall. So this is the same type of thing, but in an EEG. So again, we see this activity in the back and on the sides, and we do not see that same activity in a reader with dyslexia. But here's the part that I really want you to understand and celebrate is that the brain is pliable. It is capable of change and significant change within a short period of time. And so you can see that through repetition, through consistency, through remediation, you can actually create activity in the brain in an area that didn't have it before, which is absolutely incredible. So if you've heard that dyslexia is a lifelong thing that you can never overcome and you're always going to have to deal with it, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's exactly what Autumn was told when she took Titus to get his assessment. The woman literally said, you're going to have to just get used to this because he's never going to be able to read. As you can tell by the data, that's just simply not true. So whether it is, we're teaching the brain to respond through meditation, or gosh, there was even a cool study done of London cab drivers where they started the job, they imaged their brain, and then they had to learn a bunch of maps of the city. And so London does not have a lot of perpendicular lines. It's a lot of these curvy streets that are really small that lead into another one. So in order to truly memorize and know the map of the city, they had to expand their spatial capacity. And sure enough, in their brain scan several weeks later, they noticed that there were differences in how their brain's spatially oriented. And so we know that this stuff is happening in many, many contexts. It's just really cool to see that this is also possible for kids who are not able to have their brain read and spell well. So just super, super powerful to know that that is true and possible. So now when we look at what did this actually look like from the human perspective, we always do interview our moms in order to give us their version of the story. So we do have her interview on YouTube if you want to hear it directly from Autumn. But here are some of the big things that she had to say about Titus's experience before and after. So she said, I'm sure all parents say this about their children, but Titus is truly one of a kind. He's one of the sweetest, kindest, most respectful boys. He has a stack of journal full of ideas that he wants to create or has created. So his Christmas list often included things like a welder, duct tape, springs. His brain is so awesome. So basically what she was speaking to is this superpower brain that we know that so many kids with dyslexia have, and that's that creativity aspect or the spatial thinking capacity. So Titus definitely has that. He's got this engineering brain and he's constantly tinkering and making and creating. And so she said since a young age, he's always been so creative and so smart. And he was homeschooled up until this past year. But what really triggered Autumn is that we noticed his younger sister passing him in reading and spelling. And so that was their first clue that something was off. He was so smart in all of these other areas that it was almost a bit hidden. So super talented in math, super verbally, accomplished, has a huge vocabulary, the creativity to do all of these things. But then it became obvious that because of his sister, there was a very different ability. And so he could read, and you'll see that his reading scores were at the 39th percentile, but it just was not reading very well. He really struggled to get through those words. It would be really slow and laborious, and he had to try super, super hard. And she said his spelling was really rough. But it flew under the radar for a while. And so mom, Autumn, is a elementary school teacher. So she said, I tried everything with spelling for him. And because I was working with him and I'm a teacher, we tried it all. Did he want something tactical? Did he want something to memorize? Did he want to learn spelling with a song and dance? She said, we absolutely tried everything and it never really clicked. And anything that was minimally retained was quickly forgotten. And so she said, additionally complicating this was the fact that they live in a rural part of the country, and it was really, really hard for them to find the resources that they needed. And so at this point, they traveled a few hours to the city in order to get him tested. And it turned out that he was, quote unquote, very dyslexic. And so she said, gosh, that was super hard to hear. It was surprising and confusing because here's this super, super smart boy, and it can be very challenging to get this diagnosis. I'm like, what do you do? But she said at the testing facility itself, it was very dejecting because the gal was like, there's not much hope for him. You can try one of the box programs, but it's probably not going to work. He's going to need some type of electronic support for the rest of his life. And I didn't want to accept that. I felt like there has got to be something. And so I mention that because I do think after, working with thousands of families over the years, we see this a lot. There is still a significant narrative out there that there's nothing that you can do for dyslexia and that this just is going to have to be something that you accept. And so she said, our whole attitude is that there's got to be something that we can do, whatever it takes for our boy. I was praying about it a lot for the next few days. And then she said, magically, you appeared on my Facebook feed. And she said, oh my gosh, this is for dyslexia. This is so great. Her husband was out of the country. And she said, I vividly remember this. Like his cell phone kept cutting in and out. But I remember telling him, I found this program. Can we please get it? And he said, yes, whatever it takes for Titus, let's do it. And so what was awesome for her is that within just a couple of days, they were able to start the program. And she was consistently doing that for 12 and a half weeks. And she only missed 3 days. But she said that was so, so amazing. I didn't have to drive hours to get him support. That would have been only 1 or 2 days a week that we could have really been able to do that. But instead, she was thrilled that she was able to do that from home, in the woods where they lived, and they could get started right away. And so because of their life experiences, Autumn and Titus had actually done some brain retraining before due to some family trauma and some PTSD that they experienced. And so they both knew that that worked. And so Titus actually went into this with the knowledge of like, of course, this is going to work. He never gave her any pushback, and he was very willing to do the program with her every day. She said, we only missed 3 days out of the 13 weeks. We did it. We traveled with it. We made sure that it happened. He had a mindset of, I can do this and it will work. And it did. And it was so cool because I would tell him, Titus, do you realize that 2 weeks ago you couldn't even spell this word? And it used to be really hard. And then a light bulb would go on and he would realize that I was right. And he'd be so excited about it. She said his confidence grew so much. He would be like, well, now that I've done my brain retraining, I know how to spell that. So he did go to school this past year, and he would tell his teachers like, well, I know this, and that's because I did brain retraining. And so it was kind of a sweet chuckle and a laugh with his teachers over some of the sweet comments that he made. But he was absolutely steadfast that it was going to work, and he was getting better all of the time. And his mom's reinforcement of that absolutely helped that to happen. So she did share a cute story. She said, when we went to the library before, we would have to renew a book as many times as it would possibly be allowed to be renewed because it would take him so long, so laborious. He would still try, but they would have to renew. And she said now he's got it finished within the 10 days that they're expecting it back. And he's saying things like, oh, I was done 3 days ago, Mom. So she said that's been an awesome change. Going into junior high, they just wanted him to have more confidence and not be so difficult. And so I think that's one of the really powerful things about this too, is that she could have just left this alone. So Titus has got a super smart brain. He's super creative. He was reading, but it was super hard. And so it took him a long time. Spelling was really awful. And so she just said, I don't want him going into junior high not having confidence. We have to do something. And so now he's on the honor roll and he has straight A's. His highest grade, she chuckled about this too. She said his highest grade is in English at a 98%. And he can't believe it because he's saying, how is my English grade higher than my science grade? Because he loves science so much. But she said, it's just wonderful. So when I asked her, what were the things that you felt made you really successful? She said, well, we set up an environment for him that was free from distraction where he could fully focus. So on top of this, while they were doing the 12 and a half weeks, they were building a home. And so they were living in a little cabin at the time. And so she said, I would kick the other kids out for that 10 to 15 minutes, and it would just be Titus and I, free from distraction where he could focus. And she said in the beginning, he was a little self-conscious, especially around his siblings, but we had fun and we created little rewards every time he would get through a module. So he was already interested in doing the work, but we created this positive outlook on the whole thing. She said 10 to 15 minutes, it's not that long. So we got that in and had full focus. And we also framed dyslexia as a superpower. So she went through and pulled lists of people, of scientists, and all these famous people who have dyslexia. And she had a conversation with him about the benefits. She said, yes, there are hard parts to having dyslexia, but now we can work through those hard parts and let's talk about what benefits you have. So she was totally about flipping the narrative. And she said, if I were to advise other people, based on our experience, I would really encourage parents to create that in their own mindset, especially because your kids feed off of you too. So, just a word on that it is super powerful for you to constantly be encouraging and in belief that of course your brain can change. Like we know that there is neuroplasticity, we know that brains are dynamic, and so when you work hard, when you do the right things, you can absolutely transform what that looks like. So she said, I've talked to our school because she's a teacher and so many other parents about this program. I just like to shout it to the rooftops because we've seen it work. He's completely transformed and changed in how he can read better and he can spell. This program, for anybody who's on the fence, just do it. You put in the time and the dedication, and it is life-changing for your child. So I think it's just really fun to hear the actual kid, the human life that gets impacted by this. So now let's dive into his data and I'll walk you through the statistics of why we're so proud of this and why this is so incredible that this happened in 12 and a half weeks. So phonological awareness is one of those skills that we learn early on in our reading journey. This is probably mastered in kindergarten and sometimes even into first grade, but that's where the brain has the ability to manipulate sounds. So I have the word Germany, I'm going to take away the sound ma, and I'm going to put it back together and tell you that it's journey. So in order to do that, my brain has to be able to hear all three of those syllables in Germany. It has to know that ma is the middle one. It has to be able to pull that out and isolate it and put those other two sides back together. And for a child with dyslexia, that task is nearly impossible. Just the visualization of having the brain be able to do that and pull sounds and add sounds together is so difficult. So you can see that for Titus, he was just a little bit above half accurate. So at his age, he should have been up at this 93% accuracy, but when he started 12 and a half weeks earlier, he was only at 64% accurate. And so this massively changed to 93% accurate. I think he only had 3 errors just within that 12 and a half weeks. Then we use the Wide Range Achievement Test 5, which is a norm referenced assessment. Like they've taken thousands and thousands of kids across the country and said, like, okay, we're going to give you these reading and spelling tests. How should a kid your age be doing? And so what this meant is that when he started the program, he was reading better than 39 out of 100 of his same age peers. And when he finished the program 12 and a half weeks later, he was reading better than 99 out of 100 of his same age peers. So massive change there. In addition, same thing with spelling. When he started, he was spelling better than 4 out of 100 of his same age peers. And when he finished, he was spelling better than 82 out of 100 of his same age peers. So let's take a look at these statistics. Again, when he did this initial phonological awareness, he missed 15 of those items. So it was nearly half the test. And he only had 3 little errors when he finished at the end in just 12 and a half weeks. So did his brain change in terms of how it was responding to language, how his brain was able to manipulate those things? Absolutely, in a major, major way. And so maybe statistics is not your jam, but I'm going to just give you a little primer so that you understand how huge this data really is. So what you see in front of you is called the normal distribution curve. And in the middle here at this red line is the 50th percentile or average. So we've studied educational statistics for decades, and we know that no matter what, if you're in first grade, you make progress. And we've actually measured how much progress a kid typically makes in an entire school year. So you're in the 5th grade and you end the 5th grade. We know that it is average for a kid to make a 0.3 of a standard deviation of growth. So to go from this red line to the blue line is typical for most kids. But what we also know is that a lot of kids with dyslexia don't make typical growth within a year. In fact, they barely make any kind of progress, which is why it happens that this gap widens over time. So my peers keep growing this 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, and I really haven't addressed the root cause of what's making me struggle to read and spell. So I may make some progress, but it's not statistically significant. And meanwhile, all of the rest of my peers continue to grow. So when you have a child who is struggling, it is imperative that you have an intervention that is going to close the gap. It's going to make more than the average progress. So if you have a program that would take you to moderate statistical significance, it would go to this green line, or it would be half of a standard deviation of a jump. If the program is statistically significant, meaning that we know statistically that this program had a positive influence on the child, it would go to this 0.8. So nearly from this line to this line, this is a standard deviation. It's a 0.8 of a standard deviation. We know at that point that, holy cow, yes, this was significant, and look at the gap and the growth that we have made, the gap that we've closed, the growth that we've made. So now when we compare this to Titus's growth, this is where we're super proud, and one of the reasons that we continue to support our graduate stories is that this is incredible. So Titus started here at the red dot, which is the 39th percentile. So not the worst score that we've ever seen. He could read, but it was laborious, it was hard, he had to work hard to sound out every single word, and a lot of this score he got because he was memorizing. So if he would have made what an average kid made in progress over the entire year, he would have made it to this yellow dot. If this program we knew had a statistically significant impact, like we moved him almost a full standard deviation, he would have gone to this brown dot. But instead, in 12 and a half weeks, Titus went 1, 2 and a half standard deviations of growth. So massively, massively closing the gap. So instead of just making this tiny little progress, getting a little bit better year after year, 12 and a half weeks, he was able to leap massively, and he is now at the 99th percentile. So just completely life-changing when you look at the impact of how he was performing. And the picture looked nearly similar in spelling as well. So he started our program at the 4th percentile. So this was a really, really hard skill for him to orthographically map that, have a sight, or a sound, map it to sight, be able to actually put that down consistently. So if he would have made what a typical kid makes an entire school year for progress, he would have been at that yellow dot. If this program had a statistically significant effect, like it made a massive enough growth to statistically say, like, holy cow, this made huge progress for him, it would have been this brown dot. But instead, Titus went 1, 2.5 standard deviations of progress, and he ended 12.5 weeks later at the 82nd percentile. So again, this is something that it's hard to deny that something happened amazing in his brain and a light bulb went off in his capacity to actually respond differently to language. He is now on the honor roll. He is confident. He's successful in school. And all of that happened because his mom got really serious about doing things that were going to support his brain. So again, this was 10 to 15 minutes a day. They only missed 3 days total in that entire 12.5 week period. But this is the result of her work. So I think I would be remiss to not celebrate his mother along with this case study, because we cannot do what we do without a partnership. So we don't just support kids that live in our geographical area. We actually support kids across the globe. So we have a lot of clients in the US, but we also have clients in the UK and in Australia. We actually have a client in South Africa as well. And it's possible for us to do this because we're partnering with families and we're showing you exactly what to do. It is not overly complicated. You can definitely do this, but you have to be repetitive and you have to be consistent. And so Autumn did exactly that, which is why she got these results. We could have given her the gold in terms of the program, but if she wouldn't have actually implemented that, Titus wouldn't have gotten these results. So I want to celebrate Autumn and the fact that she did exactly what she said she was going to do and maintain that daily consistency. They did it, they traveled with it, they made sure to have it happen, and she leaned into our coaching of both the strategy and mindset support. So something else that's really unique about our program is that we coach alongside of you throughout the entire process. So she has the ability to lean on me twice a week to be able to ask me questions about Titus and his development and his growth. And so she did that. She leaned into her supports. She made the learning fun. She celebrated small wins. She talked about his brain being a superpower. I mean, she was just an incredibly hardworking mom who was willing to go the extra mile for her son. She was decisive, coachable, resourceful, and she never let go of the belief that there were greater things possible. So yes, it's true that when she got that diagnosis and the expert told her, like, look, you can do a box program, but it's probably not going to work and you're probably not going to make any progress and he's probably going to need support for the rest of his life. She absolutely could have accepted that, but she didn't. And now, she's got a huge, huge life altering difference to celebrate because of her mindset. So she said, I was praying about it and then it showed up and it's just been life changing for my son. So again, we share these every other week because we're super proud of our clients. We're super proud of our growth, but this is typical. So like we were talking about, we know what an average kid grows in an entire year. We know what statistically significant progress looks like. And this is our average growth of clients that are in our program. So we're able to do this consistently, kid after kid after kid, which is something that we're super, super proud of. If you want to take a look into some of these learnings or statistics, you absolutely can. If you're looking into like, okay, well, what are effects typically and what do we know about educational statistics? There's a citation for you down at the bottom that you can dig into if you're interested. But overall, I think a big message that we always share is why it's so critical to close the gap. So if your child is functioning as Titus was, kind of down in the lower percentiles, really struggling, having some self-esteem and confidence issues, there are inevitably missed opportunities. Whether that means that your kid has to stay in from recess or they can't take elective classes because they have to do reading intervention instead, or maybe I could have played baseball this evening, but instead I have 2.5 to 3 hours of homework. Or maybe there's a job that I really, really wanted, but I have had the negative self-talk for such a long time that I couldn't possibly do this because I struggle this, and this. that I changed my career trajectory. I mean, like there's always something that gets missed as a result of not closing this gap. You have current and ongoing struggles, future opportunities, and then inevitably there are other people that suffer because of this. So for any mother that we have ever worked with, or a dad or a grandparent, we have absolutely heard them say, like, this is hard on me too. You know, I'm the one who's having to sit with them every day. They're so reliant on me. They can't be independent. You know, there is a weight on anybody that is in and around that child who is struggling. And so when you close the gap and you have the ability to make exponential progress in a short period of time, it not only improves the academic performance, but it increases self-esteem and confidence. It creates better mental health for the child, for the whole family. There's greater access to opportunities. So if you feel like that's you and you're listening right now and you're like, oh my goodness, this, I think that we might be dealing with dyslexia. I want you to know that every quarter we have a dyslexia discovery workshop, and we actually have one coming up this Friday, but it is an intensive where we teach you all of the signs and symptoms to be looking for, in addition to giving you 3 assessments that you can use to test your child. We'll go over the data with you, tell you what that means, kind of help guide you with next steps. But a lot of times families just don't even know if that's really what they're dealing with, or if their child just doesn't really like to read. So uncovering that and figuring that out can help you a lot, because the information will then lead you to a next step that is going to be on the right path for you. And or so let us know, you know, write in the comments, send us a message if you feel like you might need some support in that. And also, if you feel like you might be a candidate for the Retrain the Dyslexic program, we do offer a complimentary call for you to figure out whether or not you would be a candidate. So we don't take everybody. We do ensure that people who are going to be in the program are actually people that we can help. So we interview you, we figure out what's going on with your child, what they've been experiencing, what they've tried, and if it's a match, and if we know that we can help you, we will definitely let you know that, and we'll walk you through what it would look like to get some support from us in the program. And if it's not a fit, we let you know that too. So there is no hurt to figuring that out and taking us up on that complimentary call. But if that's something that you feel like you want to do, especially given that summer is coming and you're thinking about like, oh my goodness, if we could spend, 12, 15, 16 weeks really getting serious and consistent about actually reorganizing how my child's brain is responding, think about what could be possible for them moving into next school year. So thank you for being here. I hope that you left inspired of, some things that are possible with the right kind of support. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks to celebrate another one of our client graduates. So thank you for being here.